Billy the Kid, Kid Antrim, Henry. He went by many names, but whatever you call him, this young gunslinger carved his place in history as one of the most notorious legends of the American West, all before his 22nd birthday. Outlaws played a big part in shaping the mythos of the Wild West, and few names stand out like Billy the Kid. Once just a boy named Henry, he became the leader of a daring band of outlaws who made life miserable for lawmen across the American Southwest. His reckless lifestyle and infamous exploits made him a legend, but it also sealed his fate. At just 21, his run came to an end, but not before he left a mark on history that would outlive him by centuries. So what was it about Billy the Kid that made him unforgettable? The legend we know as Billy the Kid began life as Henry McCarty, born around 1859 in the bustling, crowded streets of New York City's East Side. His mother, Catherine, and an unknown father, both likely Irish immigrants, brought him into a world filled with struggle and opportunity. Henry had one younger brother, Joseph, and together their family would set off on a journey westward, drawn by the powerful allure of manifest destiny sweeping across America. After losing her husband somewhere along the way, Catherine found herself raising two boys alone, but she was no stranger to hard work. From taking in laundry to playing an active role in her community, she carved out a life for her family, even helping to establish the burgeoning town of Wichita, Kansas. This humble beginning laid the groundwork for a young boy destined to become one of the Wild West's most notorious outlaws. In Kansas, Catherine crossed paths with a man named William Antrim, sparking a relationship that would lead to marriage on March 1, 1873. William became young Henry's stepfather, and many believe this is where Henry picked up the nickname Billy. Others argue that William might have been his given first name, and Henry was simply the middle name he chose to use as a boy. Regardless, after Catherine's remarriage, Henry began going by the name Henry Antrim, adopting his stepfather's last name. But while love was in the air for Catherine, her health was taking a turn for the worse. Stricken with tuberculosis, she grew increasingly ill, and her doctor advised a move to a drier climate. Acting quickly, the family packed up and headed to Silver City, New Mexico, a place that promised both fresh desert air for Catherine's health and new opportunities for William, who had set his sights on prospecting. It was a move that would mark the next chapter in young Henry's life and bring him closer to the legend he would one day become. With his stepfather off chasing gold in the mines, young Billy and his brother Joe spent their days at school, playing with friends, and helping their mother however they could. Catherine worked tirelessly to make ends meet, taking in boarders and earning the respect of her neighbors in Silver City. The McCarty family was well-loved and part of the community's fabric. But fate wasn't kind to Catherine. Her health declined rapidly, and in September 1874 she passed away at just 45 years old. Her husband, still away prospecting, didn't even make it back for the funeral. 13-year-old Billy and 11-year-old Joe stood together as friends and neighbors helped them say goodbye to their beloved mother. When William Antrim finally returned, he made it clear he had no interest in raising the boys. The brothers were separated. Joe sent to live with a man who ran a social club, exposing him to drinking, gambling, and a life of vice that would follow him to his death in 1930. Billy was taken in by the Truesdell family, friends of his mother. Antrim walked away for good. Billy didn't stick around the Truesdell home for long. By the following summer, some sort of domestic trouble sent him packing. He moved into a local boarding house, but trouble wasn't far behind. One of his housemates robbed a Chinese laundry, making off with clothes and guns. Billy, caught up in the scheme, helped hide the loot. When the stolen items were discovered in his room, it didn't take long for the law to catch up with him. Arrested for larceny, Billy found himself locked up, but not for long. Just 2 days into his sentence, the wiry young outlaw slipped up the jailhouse chimney and disappeared into the night. It was his first taste of life on the run, and he'd soon make a habit of it. Billy's daring escape made the local paper, marking the first time his name appeared in print. But this was just the beginning. Billy the Kid was on his way to becoming a legend. Word around the campfire is that Billy headed west, tracking down his stepfather. The reunion was anything but heartwarming. Antrim tossed him some money and told him to hit the trail. So Billy did just that, roaming from town to town, scratching out a living by picking up odd jobs like ranching and dabbling in the high-stakes world of local gambling dens. His antics, paired with his boyish looks, soon earned him the nickname Kid, a fitting moniker for a young troublemaker. Before long, Billy fell in with the wrong crowd, teaming up with John Mackey, a former army man turned outlaw. Running with Mackey's gang didn't do Billy's reputation any favors. The crew made a habit of stealing horses, even swiping them from U.S. soldiers. But when the law finally caught up with him, Billy lived up to his slippery reputation. While the guards were distracted at a local dance, the kid made another daring escape, once again proving that staying behind bars just wasn't his style. Not long after his latest scrape, Billy found himself at a poker table where things took a turn for the worse. A heated exchange with a blacksmith named Francis Windy Cahill escalated fast. Cahill slapped Billy and pinned him to the ground, but the kid wasn't about to take that lying down. He drew his gun and fired. Cahill crumpled and Billy fled the scene, heading straight for the New Mexico territory. Cahill succumbed to his injuries the next day, marking Billy's first official kill and the beginning of his life as a wanted man. By the time 1877 rolled around, Billy had adopted the name that would cement his legend, William H. Bonney. The press, however, preferred the name we all know, Billy the Kid. Trouble followed him like a shadow in New Mexico, and it wasn't long before he was behind bars in Lincoln County for horse theft. But fate had a strange twist in store. John Tunstall, the man whose horses Billy had stolen, saw potential in the young outlaw. Upon Billy's release, Tunstall offered him a fresh start, hiring him as a cattleman and a gun hand on his ranch. For the first time in a long while, Billy found someone who believed in him, and that loyalty lit a fire in the kid that would burn fiercely for Tunstall. February 1878 marked a turning point in Billy's story, a spark that set the West ablaze. John Tunstall, alongside Billy and a few men from his ranch, set out to sell horses, but their journey was cut short by a sheriff's posse, acting under the orders of a rival businessman. Tunstall was gunned down in cold blood, an act of treachery that ignited what history would remember as the Lincoln County War. The very next day, Tunstall's foreman was granted permission by the local prosecutor to form his own posse, a move that birthed the Regulators, a band of deputized men with Billy the Kid among their ranks. For the first time in his wild ride of a life, Billy found himself on the side of the law, earning $4 a day to bring justice to those who wronged his mentor. But justice in Lincoln County came at a steep price. Over the next 3 months, the war raged on, leaving bodies on both sides of the feud. Yet when the dust began to settle, it was only the Regulators who found themselves facing charges. As the conflict escalated, New Mexico's governor stepped into the fray, stripping the local prosecutor of his authority, a move that turned the Regulators into outlaws overnight. Amid the chaos, Billy's name became synonymous with bloodshed, as he was believed to have gunned down Sheriff William Brady and a man known as Buckshot Roberts. The Lincoln County War wasn't just a battle over power and land. It was the crucible that forged Billy the Kid into a legend. By the fall of 1878, the chaos of the Lincoln County War caught the attention of none other than President Rutherford B. Hayes. Determined to put an end to the bloodshed, Hayes removed New Mexico's territorial governor and appointed Lew Wallace to take the reins. Wallace wasted no time declaring amnesty for most involved, provided they laid down their weapons. But for Billy the Kid, there was no such reprieve. With murder indictments hanging over his head, he remained an outlaw, always a step ahead of the law. In a bold move, Billy began a correspondence with the new governor, and Wallace, intrigued, offered him a deal: testify in court and receive a pardon in return. Trusting Wallace, Billy agreed and did his part, but the pardon never came. By the time Billy realized the promise was hollow, he was already back on the run. Trouble seemed to find him like a moth to a flame, and before long he was implicated in the deaths of 2 more men. Enter Sheriff Pat Garrett, a man whose name would forever be entwined with Billy's. Garrett launched a relentless pursuit, determined to bring the kid to justice. By 1880, he'd caught up to the outlaw, and in April of the following year, Billy stood trial for the murder of Sheriff William Brady. The verdict was swift: guilty. Billy became the only man ever convicted for crimes stemming from the Lincoln County War. But his story was far from over. The legend of Billy the Kid was still writing itself. Billy the Kid's conviction sealed his fate, a death sentence. But if you thought Billy was the kind to go quietly, you'd be sorely mistaken. While awaiting his execution, he convinced a guard to escort him to the outhouse. On the way, Billy seized his chance, overpowering the guard, taking his firearm and killing him. He didn't stop there. Billy shot the second guard outside the jail with a shotgun. Finding a pickaxe, he smashed through his shackles, stole a horse, and vanished into the night. The kid was free once again, but freedom came with a price. By July 1881, Sheriff Pat Garrett was closing in. Garrett caught wind that Billy might be hiding out at the Maxwell homestead, the home of his sweetheart, Paulita Maxwell. Under cover of darkness, Garrett waited inside. On July 14th, as Billy walked into the room, he uttered the fateful words, "KNS. Who is it?" A gunshot answered him. Billy the Kid was dead. The law declared his death to be a justifiable homicide, and his remains was buried in Fort Sumner. But that wasn't the end of Billy's story. News of his death splashed across headlines worldwide, and his legend grew like wildfire, immortalized. Even decades later, the Kid's name stirred intrigue. Men like Brushy Bill Roberts claimed to be the infamous Outlaw, insisting Billy had survived that fateful night. Still, the myth of Billy the Kid rides on, a tale of rebellion, escape, and a life lived on the edge.